What happened on Maple Street that cold December night will absolutely shock you. A sleeping grandmother, a retired police dog, and 20 minutes that changed everything. If you're listening from anywhere around the world, drop a comment below and let us know where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one. The story you're about to listen to began like any other winter evening in the small town of Willowbrook, Vermont. Snow had been falling steadily since dinner time, covering the quiet neighborhood in a blanket of pristine white. The kind of snow that made everything look peaceful, almost magical. Streetlights cast soft yellow circles on the empty sidewalks, and most houses glowed warmly from their windows. Families settled in for another cold December night. At 1247 Maple Street, a modest two-story house with green shutters and a wraparound porch, 70-year-old Emma Walsh was doing what she did every evening at 9:30. She sat in her favorite armchair by the living room window, a thick paperback novel in her hands and a steaming cup of chamomile tea growing cold on the side table. The fire in the old stone fireplace crackled softly, sending dancing shadows across the walls lined with family photos and her late husband's collection of antique fishing lures. Emma had been a registered nurse for 43 years before retiring, and even now, 3 years later, she still kept the same schedule. Early to bed, early to rise. She believed in routine, especially since she'd become the primary caretaker for her 5-year-old grandson, Tyler. The boy had been living with her for 8 months now, after his parents died in a car accident outside Burlington. Tyler was everything to her now, her whole world wrapped up in one small, brave little person who still asked for his mommy sometimes in the middle of the night. Tonight, Tyler had fallen asleep hours ago, exhausted from building a snowman in the backyard, and then helping Emma bake chocolate chip cookies. He was tucked safely upstairs in the bedroom that used to be his father's, clutching his worn stuffed elephant named Peanut. Emma smiled, thinking about how Tyler insisted on wearing his Superman pajamas to bed, even though they were getting too small. "Superheroes need proper uniforms, Grandma," he'd explained, with the serious expression that always made her heart melt. But there was another member of their little family, and he was the reason Emma felt safe living alone with a small child in a house at the end of a quiet street. His name was Bear, and he was a 6-year-old German Shepherd who had served 8 years with the Vermont State Police K-9 unit before retiring due to a hip injury. Bear had belonged to Emma's neighbor, Officer Jim Crawford, but when Jim was transferred to a different state, he couldn't take Bear with him to his new apartment. Emma had volunteered to adopt the dog, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions she'd ever made. Bear wasn't just a pet, he was a protector, a companion, and Tyler's best friend all rolled into one magnificent, intelligent animal. The dog seemed to understand that his job now was different from his police work, but no less important. He watched over Tyler like a guardian angel, never letting the boy out of his sight when they were outside. When Tyler had nightmares about his parents, Bear would somehow sense it and pad quietly upstairs to lie beside the boy's bed until morning. Tonight, Bear was stretched out on his favorite spot on the living room rug, positioned perfectly so he could see both the front door and the staircase leading to Tyler's room. His ears twitched occasionally at sounds only he could hear, a car passing on the main road, wind rattling the shutters, the house settling around them. But he seemed relaxed, his breathing deep and even. Emma glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner, 10:15. She should probably head to bed soon. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant Tyler would be up early, wanting to play in the snow again or work on the jigsaw puzzle they'd started on the dining room table. She closed her book and was about to stand when Bear suddenly lifted his head. The dog's ears were completely upright now, pointed toward the back of the house. Emma paused, watching him. Bear had excellent hearing, but he didn't usually react to normal neighborhood sounds. Maybe it was just a raccoon getting into someone's garbage cans. December was a hard time for wildlife, and she'd seen plenty of animals wandering through yards looking for food. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Bear's dark eyes met hers for a moment. Then he looked back toward the kitchen. His tail wasn't wagging. That was unusual. Bear almost always wagged his tail when Emma talked to him, even if it was just a slight movement, but now he was completely still, listening to something she couldn't hear. Emma set her book aside and walked quietly to the kitchen window. The backyard looked normal, snow-covered and empty, bordered by the thick line of pine trees that separated their property from the woods behind the neighborhood. Her bird feeders hung motionless in the still air. The small shed where she kept Tyler's bicycle and the lawnmower sat dark and undisturbed. Nothing seemed out of place. She was about to return to her chair when Bear suddenly stood up. Not the casual stretch and shake that usually preceded his bedtime routine, but an alert, focused movement that made the hair on Emma's arms stand up. In all the months Bear had lived with them, she'd never seen him look quite like this. His entire body was tense, his head lowered slightly, his eyes fixed on something beyond the kitchen. "Bear?" Emma called softly, but the dog didn't look at her. Instead, he walked slowly toward the back door, his nails clicking on the hardwood floor. Emma followed him, feeling foolish but unable to ignore the growing unease in her chest. As a nurse, she'd learned to trust her instincts about when something wasn't right. And right now, something definitely felt off. Bear stopped at the back door and pressed his nose against the glass, his breath fogging the window. Emma flipped on the porch light and peered out into the backyard again. The light illuminated about 20 feet beyond the deck, showing her the same peaceful winter scene, but Bear remained focused, his breathing shallow and quick. "Maybe it's just the cold making you restless," Emma murmured, reaching down to pat his head. Bear's fur felt different under her fingers, slightly raised, the way it got when he was excited or alert during his police work days. Jim had told her that Bear could sense things long before humans became aware of them. Drug smugglers, lost hikers, even people having medical emergencies. Bear always knew something was wrong before anyone else did. Emma decided to make a quick cup of hot chocolate and wait to see if Bear settled down. She moved around the kitchen quietly, not wanting to wake Tyler, heating milk in a small saucepan and adding cocoa powder and a touch of vanilla. The familiar routine was comforting, and she found herself relaxing slightly. Bear was probably just having an off night. Even the best-trained dogs had moments when they heard or smelled something that made them react. But as she stirred the chocolate, Bear began to pace, back and forth between the kitchen and the living room, his nails clicking in a rhythm that seemed almost frantic. Emma had never seen him pace like this. When he was anxious about Tyler, he usually just positioned himself closer to the stairs. When storms were coming, he found a quiet corner and waited them out. This was different. Emma turned off the stove and walked back to where Bear stood near the back door. The dog was panting now, despite the fact that the house was cool and he hadn't been exercising. His dark eyes met hers, and she could see something in them that made her stomach clench. Not fear exactly, but a kind of urgency she'd only seen once before, when Tyler had fallen out of a tree and Bear had run to get her. "What are you trying to tell me?" Emma whispered. As if in response, Bear let out a single, sharp bark. Not loud enough to wake Tyler, but clear and insistent. Emma had heard Bear bark plenty of times, when delivery trucks pulled up, when other dogs walked by, when Tyler threw his ball too close to the street. But this bark was different. It had an edge to it that made her think of his police training, of all the dangerous situations he'd been in before he came to live with them. Emma made a decision that she would later realize saved not just her life and Tyler's, but the lives of 7 other families on Maple Street. She unlocked the back door. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and pine trees. Bear pushed past her onto the deck, not running, but moving with purpose toward the steps that led down to the backyard. Emma grabbed her heavy coat from its hook by the door and followed him, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. "Bear, come back here," she called softly, but the dog was already at the bottom of the steps, his nose to the ground near her garden shed. Emma pulled her coat tighter and walked carefully down the icy steps. The snow crunched under her slippers, and she realized how quiet everything was. No wind, no sounds from neighboring houses, no traffic from the main road. Just the sound of her breathing and Bear's paws in the snow. She was halfway across the yard when Bear suddenly froze. His whole body went rigid, his tail straight out behind him in the pointing position Jim had shown her during Bear's police work. Emma stopped walking, her heart beginning to pound. Bear only pointed like that when he had found something important. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, moving closer to where he stood near the back corner of the shed. That's when she smelled it, faint but unmistakable, carried on the still night air. Gasoline, not the normal scent of a car or lawnmower, but something stronger, something that didn't belong in her backyard on a December night. Emma's nursing instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had helped her spot medical emergencies before they became critical, that had saved countless lives during her 4 decades in hospitals. Something was very, very wrong. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and turned on its flashlight. The thin beam of light swept across the snow-covered ground behind the shed, and what she saw made her blood freeze in her veins. Footprints. Large boot prints that definitely weren't hers or Tyler's, leading from the woods behind their property to the back of her shed. The prints were fresh. The snow inside them wasn't packed down yet, which meant they had been made recently, very recently. Bear moved along the footprint trail, his nose still to the ground, leading Emma toward the back of the shed where she stored her gardening supplies and Tyler's outdoor toys. As they rounded the corner, the smell of gasoline became stronger. Emma's hands were shaking as she aimed the phone's light at the base of the shed. What she saw there made her grab Bear's collar and start backing away immediately. Someone had piled kindling and newspaper against the back wall of her shed. The materials were soaked with what was clearly gasoline. She could see the liquid glistening in her phone's light and smell the overwhelming fumes. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the device sitting next to the pile of flammable materials. Emma had seen enough medical dramas and news reports to recognize what looked like a timing device. Wires, a small digital display, and what appeared to be some kind of ignition mechanism. She didn't need to be an expert to understand what she was looking at. Someone had built a firebomb behind her shed. Someone had planned to burn down her house while she and Tyler slept inside. Bear let out another sharp bark, this one louder and more urgent. His training had kicked in completely now. He was alerting, the way he'd been taught to alert his human partner when he found something dangerous. Emma's mind raced as she backed further away from the shed, pulling Bear with her. Who would do this? Why would anyone want to hurt her and Tyler? They didn't have enemies. They lived quietly, kept to themselves, bothered no one. Emma helped at the church bake sale and volunteered at the library. Tyler was just a little boy who'd already lost too much. But there was no time to figure out motives. The device had a display, and even from several feet away, Emma could see numbers on it. She couldn't make out exactly what they said, but she could see they were counting down. She ran toward the house, Bear beside her, fumbling for her phone. Her fingers felt numb from cold and fear as she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Emma Walsh at 1247 Maple Street. Someone has placed some kind of explosive device behind my house. It looks like a timer. I think they're trying to burn down my house with me and my grandson inside. Ma'am, are you and your grandson safe right now? Emma reached the back door and looked up at Tyler's bedroom window. His room was dark and quiet. Yes, we're safe for now, but there's a timer on this thing. I don't know how much time we have. Officers in the fire department are on their way. Ma'am, I need you to get your grandson and leave the house immediately. Do not pack anything. Just get him and get out. Emma dropped the phone and ran upstairs, Bear following close behind. Tyler's room was warm and cozy, the little boy buried under his favorite quilt with Peanut tucked under his arm. Emma hated to wake him, hated to scare him, but she had no choice. Tyler, sweetheart, wake up, she said softly, shaking his shoulder. Tyler's eyes opened slowly, confused and sleepy. Grandma? Is it morning? No, baby, but we need to go outside for a little while. Can you put on your coat and boots really quickly? Tyler sat up, rubbing his eyes. Why do we have to go outside? It's cold. Emma helped him into his winter coat, trying to keep her voice calm. Bear found something in the backyard that the police need to look at. It'll just be for a few minutes. Bear seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. He positioned himself next to Tyler, letting the boy lean against him as Emma helped with his boots. Tyler trusted Bear completely, and if the dog seemed calm, Tyler felt safe. They made it downstairs and out the front door, just as the first police car turned onto Maple Street, its lights flashing but no siren. Emma was grateful for that. She didn't want to wake the whole neighborhood and cause panic. The officer who got out of the car was young, maybe late 20s, with the serious expression of someone who had dealt with dangerous situations before. Mrs. Walsh, I'm Officer Martinez. Can you show me what you found? Emma led him around to the backyard, carrying Tyler, while Bear walked alongside them. Officer Martinez took one look at the device behind the shed and immediately radioed for backup. We need the bomb squad here now, he said into his radio, and evacuate the houses on either side. Emma's legs felt weak. Bomb squad. This was really happening. Someone had actually tried to kill her and Tyler. More police cars arrived, followed by fire trucks and an ambulance. The quiet street that had been so peaceful an hour ago was now full of flashing lights and uniformed responders. Neighbors began appearing on their porches, drawn by the commotion. Officer Martinez approached Emma, who was standing by his patrol car with Tyler and Bear. Mrs. Walsh, the device appears to be set to go off in about 15 minutes. If your dog hadn't alerted you when he did, you and your grandson would have been asleep when the fire started. Emma looked down at Bear, who was sitting calmly beside Tyler, the boy's hand resting on the dog's head. 15 minutes. They would have died in 15 minutes, if not for Bear's training and instincts. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez continued, "we're going to need to evacuate the surrounding houses as a precaution. Do you have somewhere you and Tyler can stay tonight?" Emma nodded, still in shock. "My sister lives across town. But Officer Martinez, I don't understand why someone would do this. Tyler and I don't have any enemies. We don't bother anyone." "We're going to figure that out, ma'am. Right now, the most important thing is that you're both safe." As they waited for the bomb squad to arrive, Emma watched more neighbors being evacuated from their homes. The Johnsons from next door, an elderly couple who had always been kind to Tyler. The Peterson family from across the street, with their 3 teenage children. All of them forced from their beds because someone had targeted her house. Tyler had fallen back asleep in Emma's arms, exhausted by the excitement and trusting that the adults would handle whatever was wrong. Bear remained alert, watching the activity around them, but staying close to his family. Emma stroked Tyler's hair and tried to make sense of what had happened. Someone had walked through the woods behind her house, carrying materials to build a firebomb. They had planned this carefully, timing it for when she and Tyler would be asleep and unable to escape. If not for Bear's incredible hearing and training, they would have died tonight. But who would want to hurt them, and why? The bomb squad arrived 20 minutes later, their van pulling up to the growing collection of emergency vehicles on Maple Street. Emma watched from Officer Martinez's patrol car as 2 specialists in heavy protective gear approached her backyard. Tyler stirred in her arms but didn't wake up, and Bear remained on high alert, his eyes tracking every movement of the uniformed responders. "Mrs. Walsh," Officer Martinez said quietly, "the specialists are going to disarm the device now. It should only take a few minutes." Emma nodded, but her mind was racing with questions she couldn't answer. The peaceful life she'd built with Tyler felt shattered, replaced by a terrifying reality where someone wanted them dead. She thought about Tyler's parents, how they died in what everyone assumed was a random accident. Was it possible that someone had been targeting their family for longer than she'd realized? Bear suddenly stood up, his attention focused on something beyond the police cars. Emma followed his gaze and saw a figure standing at the far end of the street, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. The person was too far away to make out clearly, but they seemed to be watching the scene unfold. "Officer Martinez," Emma said, pointing toward the tree, "there's someone over there." The officer looked in the direction she indicated, but by the time he spotted the location, the figure had disappeared. "Probably just a curious neighbor," he said, but Emma noticed he radioed the information to the other units anyway. Bear remained standing, his nose twitching as he processed scents carried on the cold night air. Emma had learned to read his body language over the months they'd lived together, and right now, every signal he was giving suggested he sensed something important. "Ma'am," one of the bomb squad specialists called out as he approached their position, "we've successfully disarmed the device. You're safe now." Emma felt her shoulders sag with relief, but the specialist's next words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the December cold. However, this wasn't a random act of vandalism. The device was sophisticated, built by someone with knowledge of explosives and timing mechanisms. And Mrs. Walsh, this wasn't meant to just damage your property. The amount of accelerant used and the positioning of the device, whoever did this intended to make sure no one in your house survived. Detective Sarah Chen, who had arrived during the bomb squad's work, stepped forward. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, but a serious demeanor that suggested she'd seen too much violence in her career. "Mrs. Walsh, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you some questions. Is there anyone who might have a grievance against you or your family? An ex-employee from the hospital where you worked? Someone who might blame you for a medical outcome? A dispute with neighbors or contractors?" Emma searched her memory, but came up empty. "No, detective. I retired 3 years ago without any problems. The hospital even threw me a retirement party. My neighbors are all friendly. Tyler and I keep to ourselves mostly, just quiet activities like gardening and going to the library." "What about Tyler's parents? You mentioned he's living with you now. They died in a car accident 8 months ago. It was raining, and David, my son, hit a patch of ice on Route 89. The state police said it was just one of those tragic accidents." Detective Chen made notes in her pad. I'm sorry for your loss. Did David or his wife Rachel have any issues with anyone? Work problems, financial disputes, anything like that? Emma thought carefully. Her son had been an accountant for a mid-sized firm in Burlington, and Rachel had taught elementary school. They were both well-liked people. David's boss even spoke at the funeral about what a dedicated employee he was. Rachel's students and their parents loved her. Bear suddenly moved away from Emma's side, walking to the edge of the police perimeter and sniffing the air intently. Detective Chen noticed his behavior. That's quite a dog you have there. Officer Martinez mentioned he's the one who alerted you to the device. Bear is retired from the Vermont State Police K-9 unit. He lived with us since Officer Crawford moved out of state. Emma watched as Bear continued his investigation of scents only he could detect. He's never acted like this before tonight. Usually he's calm and gentle, especially around Tyler. Police dogs are trained to detect more than just drugs and explosives, Detective Chen explained. They can sense human emotions, fear, aggression. If Bear's acting unusual, it might mean he's picking up on something we can't see. As if responding to his name, Bear returned to Emma's side, but his attention remained focused on the surrounding area. Tyler finally woke up, looking around at all the flashing lights and uniformed people with confusion. "Grandma, why are there so many police cars?" he asked sleepily. Emma kissed the top of his head. "Remember how Bear found something in the backyard? The police officers needed to come look at it. Everything's okay now." Tyler seemed to accept this explanation, but he wrapped his arms around Bear's neck when the dog sat down beside him. "Good boy, Bear. You're such a good dog." Detective Chen knelt down to Tyler's level. "Hi there, Tyler. I'm Detective Chen. Your dog Bear is definitely a hero tonight." Tyler smiled shyly. "Bear protects us. He sleeps by my door when I have bad dreams about Mommy and Daddy." Emma's heart ached at Tyler's innocent words. This little boy had already lost his parents, and now someone was trying to take away the safety and stability she'd worked so hard to provide for him. "Mrs. Walsh," Detective Chen said, standing up, "we're going to need you and Tyler to stay somewhere else tonight while we process the scene. Is your sister's house secure?" "Yes, she lives in a gated community across town. But Detective, what happens next? Do we just wait for this person to try again? We're going to put a patrol car on your sister's street tonight, and tomorrow we'll start a full investigation. I want you to think about anyone who might have access to information about your routines. When you go to bed, when Tyler goes to school, when you're usually home alone." Emma's blood ran cold. "You think someone has been watching us?" "The timing of this attack suggests the perpetrator knew you'd both be asleep. They also knew exactly where to place the device for maximum damage. That level of planning usually means surveillance." Bear suddenly stood up again, his ears perked toward the woods behind Emma's house. This time, Detective Chen noticed immediately. "Officer Martinez, can you get some units to sweep the woods behind the property? The dog's alerting to something back there." 2 officers with flashlights headed toward the tree line, their beams cutting through the darkness between the pines. Emma watched nervously, holding Tyler closer. "Grandma, is Bear scared?" Tyler asked, noticing the dog's tense posture. "No, sweetheart. Bear isn't scared. He's just making sure we're safe." The officers returned after 15 minutes, one of them carrying an evidence bag. "Detective, we found this about 50 yards into the woods. Looks like someone was using it to watch the house." Detective Chen examined the contents of the bag, a pair of high-powered binoculars and what appeared to be a small notebook. "Mrs. Walsh, I think we can safely say this wasn't a random attack. Someone has been planning this for a while." Emma felt sick. Someone had been hiding in the woods behind her house, watching her and Tyler through binoculars, planning the perfect time to kill them. The violation felt almost as terrifying as the bomb itself. "The notebook might have information about their surveillance," Detective Chen continued. "We'll analyze it at the lab, but for now, I want you to go to your sister's house and try to get some rest. We'll have an officer stationed outside all night." As they prepared to leave, Emma took one last look at her house. Less than 2 hours ago, it had been a safe haven where she and Tyler were building a new life together after tragedy. Now it felt tainted, invaded by someone's malicious intent. Bear seemed reluctant to leave, turning back several times as they walked to Detective Chen's car. Emma wondered if he could still smell traces of the person who had planted the bomb, if his police training was telling him the danger wasn't completely over. Tyler fell asleep again during the drive to Emma's sister Carol's house, exhausted by the night's events. Carol met them at the door in her bathrobe, her face pale with worry. "Emma, what happened? Detective Chen called, but she didn't give me details." Emma quickly explained while Tyler was carried to Carol's guest room, still sleeping. Bear followed them upstairs, positioning himself beside the bed in his usual protective stance. "Who would do such a thing?" Carol whispered as they went back downstairs. "You and Tyler are the most harmless people I know." "That's what I keep thinking. But Detective Chen says whoever did this has been watching us, planning this attack. Carol, what if they try again?" Detective Chen, who had been making phone calls in the kitchen, joined them in the living room. "Mrs. Walsh, I've been in contact with the lab. The notebook we found contains what appears to be a surveillance log. Detailed notes about your daily routines, when Tyler goes to school, when you go grocery shopping. This person has been watching you for at least 3 weeks. Emma sank into Carol's sofa, overwhelmed. 3 weeks? How is that possible? How did I not notice? Professional surveillance is designed to be undetectable, but the good news is that detailed notes like this often contain clues about the perpetrator's identity. We'll know more in the morning. After Detective Chen left, Emma sat in Carol's guest room, watching Tyler sleep. Bear lay on the floor beside the bed, but his ears remained alert to every sound in the unfamiliar house. Emma realized that even though the immediate danger was over, their lives had changed forever. Someone out there wanted them dead, and until that person was caught, they would never truly be safe. She thought about Tyler's parents again, about the car accident that had seemed so random at the time. What if it hadn't been random? What if someone had been targeting their family for reasons she couldn't understand? Bear lifted his head and looked at her, as if sensing her troubled thoughts. Emma reached down to pat his head, grateful beyond words for his presence. Without Bear's training and instincts, she and Tyler would have died tonight. But why had someone wanted them dead in the first place? The questions that would keep Emma awake for the rest of the night were just beginning, and the answers would prove to be far more shocking than she could possibly imagine. What Emma discovered in the morning would change everything she thought she knew about her son's death, and reveal a truth so disturbing that even Detective Chen had never seen anything like it. Emma barely slept that night, startling awake every time she heard an unfamiliar sound in Carol's house. Bear seemed to sense her restlessness, moving from his position beside Tyler's bed to lie on the floor next to the couch, where Emma was trying to rest. Every few hours, the dog would get up and patrol the house, checking windows and doors with the thoroughness of his police training. At 6 a.m, Emma's phone rang. Detective Chen's voice was tight with urgency. "Mrs. Walsh, I need you to come to the station as soon as possible. We've analyzed the surveillance notebook, and there are some things you need to see." Emma's stomach dropped. "Have you found who did this?" "Not yet, but we've found something that connects your case to others. Mrs. Walsh, I don't think last night was the first attempt on your family." Emma's hands shook as she ended the call. Carol offered to watch Tyler, who was still sleeping peacefully with Bear curled up beside him. The sight of her grandson safe and warm gave Emma strength as she prepared to face whatever Detective Chen had discovered. The police station was bustling with activity, even at the early hour. Detective Chen led Emma to a small conference room where documents and photographs were spread across a table like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Mrs. Walsh, please sit down. What I'm about to show you is difficult, but I need you to look at everything carefully." Detective Chen placed the surveillance notebook in front of Emma. The handwriting was neat and methodical, like someone keeping a scientific log. Emma read the entries with growing horror. December 3rd, Target arrives home from grocery store at 4:15 p.m. Child visible in back seat. Dog alerts to movement in woods but no investigation. December 7th, lights out in main house by 10:30 p.m. Child's room dark by 9 o'clock p.m. Dog patrols yard at 11:45 p.m. December 12th, Target takes child to library. Returns 2:30 p.m. Predictable Tuesday routine confirmed. Emma looked up at Detective Chen, feeling sick. They were watching us like we were animals in a zoo. It gets worse. Look at this entry from 3 weeks ago. Detective Chen pointed to a page near the beginning of the notebook. Target appears unaware of previous incident in family. Investigation complete. Proceeding with final phase. "Previous incident?" Emma whispered. "What previous incident?" Detective Chen pulled out a thick file folder. "Mrs. Walsh, after reading this notebook, I contacted the investigating officers from your son's car accident. I've been up all night reviewing their reports." Emma's heart began racing. She had always accepted that David and Rachel's death was a tragic accident, a moment of bad weather and worse luck. The idea that it might have been something else had never seriously occurred to her. "The accident report states that your son's car went off Route 89 during a rainstorm, hitting black ice. The vehicle rolled several times before hitting a tree. Both David and Rachel died on impact." Emma nodded. She had heard these details at the time, though the grief had made everything feel surreal and distant. "But here's what wasn't in the initial report," Detective Chen continued. "The investigating officer noted that the car's brake lines showed unusual wear patterns. At the time, it was attributed to the violence of the crash, but when I had our mechanics look at the photos this morning, they found something concerning." Detective Chen spread out several photographs of twisted metal and broken parts. To Emma, they looked like the aftermath of any serious accident, but Detective Chen pointed to specific areas with a pen. "These cuts in the brake lines aren't consistent with crash damage. They're too clean, too precise. Mrs. Walsh, we think someone sabotaged your son's car." Emma stared at the photos, unable to process what she was hearing. "You're saying someone murdered David and Rachel?" "We're saying it's a strong possibility. And if that's true, then last night's attack wasn't random. Someone has been targeting your family systematically." Emma's legs felt weak. She gripped the edge of the table, trying to stay upright as the room seemed to spin around her. David and Rachel hadn't died in a random accident. Someone had deliberately cut their brake lines, knowing they would be driving in dangerous weather. "But why?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would anyone want to hurt my family? David was an accountant. Rachel taught second grade. They were good people who helped others." Detective Chen sat down across from Emma, her expression gentle but serious. "That's what we need to figure out. Mrs. Walsh, I need you to think carefully about your son's work. Did he ever mention any problems with clients? Any disputes or situations that made him uncomfortable?" Emma searched her memory, trying to recall conversations with David about his job. He had worked for Morrison, Kellerman and Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm that handled taxes and financial planning for local businesses and wealthy individuals. "David loved his work," Emma said slowly. "He said he was good at finding patterns in numbers, helping people organize their finances, but he never mentioned any conflicts." "What about recent changes in his behavior? Did he seem worried or stressed about anything in the months before the accident?" Emma thought back to the last time she had seen David and Rachel alive. They had come for Sunday dinner 2 weeks before the accident, bringing Tyler and staying late to help Emma plant bulbs in her garden for spring flowers that would never bloom. Actually, now that you mention it, David did seem different that last visit. He was quieter than usual, and I caught him staring out the window several times like he was thinking about something serious. When I asked if everything was okay, he said work was getting complicated. Detective Chen made notes. Complicated how? He didn't give details, but he did say something strange. He told me that if anything ever happened to him and Rachel, I should make sure Tyler was always safe. At the time, I thought he was just being a worried parent. Did he say anything else? Anything about specific people or situations? Emma closed her eyes, trying to remember every detail of that conversation. He mentioned that some of his clients were involved in things that made him uncomfortable. He said he was keeping detailed records of everything, just in case. Detective Chen leaned forward. "Records? What kind of records?" "I don't know. He said he kept backup files of all his work, but I assumed that was just normal business practice." "Mrs. Walsh, do you know if these backup files still exist? Did David keep them at home or at the office?" Emma's mind raced. After David and Rachel's death, she had helped clean out their house before it was sold to pay for Tyler's future expenses. Most of David's work materials had been returned to his office, but she remembered finding a safe in their basement. There was a small safe in David's home office. I never opened it. The lawyer said it probably just contained insurance papers and important documents. The new owners of the house might still have it. Detective Chen was already reaching for her phone. "I'm going to get a warrant to examine that safe. Mrs. Walsh, if your son discovered something illegal about his clients and kept records, that could be the motive for his murder." Emma felt overwhelmed by the rapid pace of revelations. In less than 12 hours, her quiet life had been shattered by a bomb attempt, and now she was learning that David and Rachel might have been Everything she thought she knew about her family's tragedy was wrong. "Detective Chen, If David was killed because of something he discovered at work, why wait 8 months to come after Tyler and me? That's a good question. My guess is that whoever killed your son has been searching for those backup records. When they couldn't find them, they decided to eliminate anyone who might know where they are. Emma's blood ran cold. They think Tyler and I know something we don't actually know. Exactly. And until we find those records and identify the killer, you and Tyler remain in danger. Detective Chen's phone buzzed with a text message. She read it quickly, then looked up at Emma with a grim expression. "Mrs. Walsh, we have another problem. The officer I sent to check on your house this morning found something disturbing." Emma's heart began racing again. "What now?" "Someone broke into your house during the night. They tore apart your son's old room, the one Tyler is sleeping in now. They were looking for something specific." Emma realized that if she and Tyler had stayed at home last night, they would have been there when the intruder came looking for David's records. Between the bomb and the break-in, someone was becoming increasingly desperate to find whatever David had hidden. "The good news is that Bear's presence probably saved your lives twice in one night," Detective Chen continued. "His alerting to the bomb forced you to leave before the intruder arrived." Emma thought about Bear's unusual behavior, how he had seemed to sense danger long before she understood what was happening. His police training had not only saved them from the explosion, but had inadvertently protected them from a second attack. "Detective, what happens now? Tyler and I can't hide at my sister's house forever." "We're going to get that warrant and examine David's safe today. Hopefully, we'll find the records that explain why your family has been targeted. In the meantime, I'm arranging for protective custody. You and Tyler will be moved to a secure location until we catch the person responsible." Emma nodded, though the thought of uprooting Tyler again broke her heart. The little boy had already lost his parents and his home. Now he was losing the sense of safety and stability she had worked so hard to create for him. "Mrs. Walsh, there's one more thing. The handwriting in the surveillance notebook suggests the person watching you has some level of education and organization. This isn't a random criminal or someone acting on impulse. Whoever is behind this has resources and planning ability." Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. "You're saying this is someone with money and connections? Someone who could afford to have your son's car sabotaged and then wait 8 months to eliminate witnesses? Someone who knew enough about explosives to build a sophisticated device? Yes, we're probably looking at someone with significant resources." As Emma prepared to leave the police station, Detective Chen stopped her at the door. "Mrs. Walsh, I want you to know that we're going to find whoever did this. Your son David apparently died trying to protect people from something illegal and dangerous. We're not going to let his sacrifice be in vain." Emma drove back to Carol's house with her mind spinning. David had discovered something at work that cost him his life. Someone had murdered him and Rachel, then spent 8 months searching for evidence that could expose them. When they couldn't find what they were looking for, they decided to kill Emma and Tyler rather than risk discovery. But what had David found? And where were the records that someone was willing to commit multiple murders to obtain? Emma pulled into Carol's driveway and sat in the car for a moment, gathering her strength. Inside, Tyler was probably awake and wanting breakfast. She needed to figure out how to explain to a 5-year-old that they were going into hiding because someone wanted to hurt them. As she walked toward the house, Emma noticed Bear standing at the front window, watching her approach. Even from outside, she could see the dog's alert posture. Bear had saved their lives twice in the past 24 hours, and Emma had a feeling they were going to need his protection even more in the days ahead. Whatever David had discovered, whoever was hunting her family, Emma was determined to see justice done. But first, she had to keep Tyler safe long enough for Detective Chen to uncover the truth. The safe in David's old house held secrets that would shock everyone, but would Emma and Tyler survive long enough to see their family's killer finally exposed? 3 hours later, Emma found herself standing in the basement of the house where David and Rachel had built their dreams together. The new owners, a young couple named the Hendersons, had been more than willing to let the police examine the safe when Detective Chen explained the situation. They had never bothered to open it, assuming it contained the previous owner's personal documents. Tyler stayed upstairs with Mrs. Henderson and Bear, who had insisted on coming along despite Detective Chen's initial hesitation. Emma was grateful for the dog's presence. Tyler seemed calmer when Bear was nearby, and Emma trusted the dog's instincts more than ever after the previous night. The basement looked different than Emma remembered. The Hendersons had painted the walls and added new lighting, but David's small office area in the corner remained largely unchanged. The safe sat in the same spot where David had installed it 2 years before his death, built into the concrete wall behind a filing cabinet. Detective Chen knelt beside the safe with a locksmith who had arrived with the proper equipment. "Mrs. Walsh, do you have any idea what the combination might be? Birth dates, anniversaries, anything significant to your son?" Emma thought carefully. David had always been sentimental about family dates. Try Tyler's birthday, October 15th. That would be 10/15/19, the year Tyler was born. The locksmith spun the dial carefully. Nothing. "How about your son's birthday or anniversary?" Emma provided several more combinations. David and Rachel's wedding date, David's birthday, even Emma's own birthday. None of them worked. The locksmith shook his head. "Mrs. Walsh, I can open it, but it'll take some time and specialized equipment. This is a high-end safe, designed to resist tampering." As they waited for the locksmith to set up his equipment, Detective Chen received a phone call that made her face go pale. Emma watched with growing anxiety as the detective stepped away to take the call privately. When Detective Chen returned, her expression was grim. "Mrs. Walsh, we have a development. The lab analyzed fingerprints from the surveillance equipment we found in the woods behind your house." Emma braced herself for more bad news. "Did you identify who's been watching us?" "The prints belong to Marcus Webb, a private investigator who operates out of Burlington. We've been trying to locate him all morning, but his office is closed and no one's seen him since yesterday." Emma frowned. "A private investigator? Why would a PI want to hurt Tyler and me?" "Private investigators work for clients, Mrs. Walsh. Someone hired Marcus Webb to watch your family, and possibly to do much more than just surveillance." The locksmith interrupted their conversation. "I've got it open." Emma's heart pounded as Detective Chen approached the safe. The heavy door swung open to reveal a metal interior about the size of a small refrigerator. Inside were several items that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. The safe contained 3 external hard drives, a thick manila envelope, and a handwritten letter with Emma's name on it in David's familiar handwriting. Detective Chen carefully removed each item, laying them on a plastic sheet she had spread on the basement floor. "Mrs. Walsh, I think your son left this specifically for you to find." Emma's hands shook as she opened the letter. David's handwriting looked hurried, as if he had written it quickly, but wanted to make sure every word was clear. "Mom, if you're reading this, then something has happened to Rachel and me, and you're probably in danger too. I've discovered something at work that I never should have seen, and I'm afraid of what might happen if the wrong people find out what I know. For the past 6 months, I've been keeping the books for several clients who I now realize are involved in money laundering and tax fraud on a massive scale. At first, I thought the unusual transactions were just complex business dealings, but I've pieced together evidence of a criminal operation that involves millions of dollars and some very powerful people. The external drives contain copies of all the financial records I've been keeping. Everything is documented: false invoices, offshore accounts, payments to officials who should have been investigating these crimes instead of ignoring them. I've also included recordings of conversations where clients admitted to illegal activities. Mom, if something happens to us, please take Tyler and get somewhere safe before you turn this evidence over to the police. These people have already threatened Rachel and me. They have resources and connections that go higher than local law enforcement. Trust only Detective Sarah Chen. She's the only officer I've met who seems completely clean. I'm sorry we got our family involved in this. I never meant for any of this to touch you or Tyler, but if these records can stop these criminals from hurting other families, then maybe something good can come from this nightmare. I love you, Mom. Take care of Tyler and tell him every day how much his parents loved him. David." Emma wiped tears from her eyes as she finished reading. David had known he was in danger and had tried to protect his family while also doing the right thing. He had died trying to expose criminals who were stealing from the community and corrupting the officials sworn to protect it. Detective Chen was already examining the external drives. "Mrs. Walsh, if these contain what your son describes, we're looking at evidence of a major criminal conspiracy. This explains why someone was willing to commit murder to keep it secret." The locksmith had finished packing his equipment and left, but Emma barely noticed. She was thinking about David's warning to trust only Detective Chen, and wondering how extensive the corruption might be if her son felt he couldn't trust local law enforcement. Detective, David's letter says these criminals have connections in law enforcement. How do we know who else might be involved? Detective Chen's expression was serious. That's exactly what I was thinking. Mrs. Walsh, I'm going to need to handle this evidence very carefully. If there are corrupt officials involved, we can't risk tipping them off before we have a chance to build a case. They carefully packed the external drives and documents into evidence bags. As they prepared to leave the basement, Emma noticed something else in the corner where the safe had been, a small piece of paper that had apparently fallen out when the safe was opened. Emma picked it up and gasped. It was a business card for Morrison, Kellerman, and Associates, David's accounting firm, but someone had written a note on the back in red ink. Stop digging, or your family pays the price. Detective Chen examined the card grimly. Mrs. Walsh, this confirms that your son was directly threatened. Someone at his own workplace knew what he was investigating. Emma felt sick. David had spent the last months of his life surrounded by people who wanted him dead, going to work every day knowing that his colleagues might be planning to hurt his family. The courage it must have taken to continue gathering evidence while living under that kind of threat was almost unimaginable. As they climbed the stairs from the basement, Emma could hear Tyler's laughter from the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson had apparently been entertaining him with stories, while Bear sat patiently nearby. The sound of Tyler's happiness in the midst of such darkness gave Emma strength to keep going. "Grandma!" Tyler ran to Emma when he saw her. "Mrs. Henderson has a cat named Whiskers, and Bear made friends with him." Emma hugged Tyler tightly, trying not to let him see how upset she was. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Bear is very good at making new friends." Detective Chen spoke quietly with Mrs. Henderson, explaining that they had found what they were looking for and thanking her for her cooperation. As they prepared to leave, Bear suddenly became alert, his ears perked toward the front of the house. "Detective," Emma said quietly, "Bear's alerting again." Detective Chen immediately moved to the front window and peered through the curtains. "There's a dark sedan parked across the street. It wasn't there when we arrived." Emma's heart began racing. "Do you think they followed us here?"
Mrs. Walsh, take Tyler and Bear to the back of the house. Stay away from windows.
Detective Chen radioed for backup, while Emma guided Tyler and Bear toward the kitchen. Mrs. Henderson looked frightened, but remained calm, helping Emma keep Tyler occupied while they waited to see what would happen. Through the kitchen window, Emma could see the backyard that bordered a small wooded area. She remembered David and Rachel's plans to build a playground back there for Tyler, dreams that would never be realized. Now that same yard might become the scene of another confrontation with the people who had destroyed her family. Bear positioned himself between Tyler and the windows, his body tense and ready. Emma realized that the dog understood they were in danger even before any humans had recognized the threat. His training and instincts had saved them repeatedly, and she had a feeling they weren't finished needing his protection. Detective Chen returned to the kitchen, speaking quietly so Tyler wouldn't overhear. "Backup is on the way, but the sedan just drove off. Whoever was watching us decided not to confront us directly." Emma shivered. "They know we found the evidence, which means they're going to become even more desperate. Mrs. Walsh, we need to get you and Tyler to that safe house immediately. These people have already killed your son, and they won't hesitate to kill you if they think it will protect their operation." As they prepared to leave the Henderson house, Emma took one last look around the home where David and Rachel had been so happy. Tyler had taken his first steps in this living room, spoken his first words at the kitchen table where they had just been sitting. The house held so many precious memories, but it also represented everything that had been stolen from their family. Detective Chen helped Emma and Tyler into her unmarked police car, while Bear jumped into the back seat. As they drove away, Emma noticed at least 3 other police vehicles positioned around the neighborhood, watching for any sign of the people who had been following them. "Detective, what happens next with the evidence David left?" "I'm going to turn it over to the FBI. If there's corruption in local law enforcement like your son suspected, we need federal investigators who aren't connected to anyone involved. This case is bigger than anything our department can handle alone." Emma was quiet for several minutes, processing everything that had happened. David had died because he tried to do the right thing. Someone at his own workplace had threatened his family, then followed through on that threat when David refused to stay silent about criminal activity. "Tyler," Emma said, turning to look at her grandson in the back seat, "we're going to stay somewhere new for a few days, just until the police finish their work." Tyler looked up from petting Bear. "Like a vacation?" "Something like that. Bear will be with us the whole time, and there will be police officers nearby to make sure we're safe. Tyler seemed satisfied with this explanation. At 5 years old, he was too young to understand the full scope of the danger they faced, but he trusted Emma and Bear to protect him. Emma hoped that trust wasn't misplaced. As they drove toward the safe house, Detective Chen's radio crackled with urgent communications. Emma couldn't understand all the police codes, but the tension in Detective Chen's voice made it clear that something serious was happening. "Mrs. Walsh," Detective Chen said after responding to the radio, "we have another problem. Marcus Webb, the private investigator who was conducting surveillance on your family, was found dead in his office 20 minutes ago, single gunshot to the head." Emma's blood went cold. "They killed him?" "Someone didn't want Webb talking to us about who hired him. Mrs. Walsh, this confirms that we're dealing with people who will kill anyone they perceive as a threat." Emma looked back at Tyler, who was still contentedly petting Bear, unaware that another person had just died because of the secrets his father had uncovered. How many more people would be killed before this nightmare ended? Bear suddenly lifted his head and looked out the back window of the car. His low growl made Emma turn to see what had caught his attention. A dark sedan was following them, staying several car lengths back, but making the same turns Detective Chen was making. "Detective," Emma said urgently, "I think we're being followed." Who was in the car behind them, and how far would they go to silence the last witnesses to their crimes? Detective Chen immediately radioed for backup, while making a series of quick turns through residential streets, trying to lose the sedan that was maintaining its distance behind them. Emma held her breath as they wound through neighborhoods she didn't recognize, past houses where families were probably sitting down to lunch, unaware that a deadly chase was happening right outside their windows. Bear remained alert in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the car behind them. Tyler seemed to sense the tension, even though he didn't understand what was happening. He pressed closer to Bear, who allowed the boy to lean against his shoulder while never taking his attention off the potential threat. "Detective, they're still following us," Emma said, watching the sedan make the same turn they had just completed. "I know, but backup is closing in. 2 units are moving to intercept." Emma watched through the rear window as 2 police cars suddenly appeared from side streets, positioning themselves between Detective Chen's car and the sedan. The pursuing vehicle immediately made a sharp right turn and disappeared into a maze of suburban streets. "They're not going to confront us directly," Detective Chen observed. "Whoever's behind this is smart enough to avoid a direct confrontation with police. But, Mrs. Walsh, the fact that they found us so quickly means they have resources we haven't fully understood yet." Emma shivered. How could they have known where we were going? That's what worries me. Either they're monitoring police communications, or they have someone inside law enforcement feeding them information. The safe house turned out to be a modest ranch home in a quiet neighborhood about 40 minutes outside the city. It looked like any other suburban house. Neat lawn, small garden, mailbox at the end of the driveway. But Emma noticed the security cameras positioned discreetly around the property and the way Detective Chen spoke to someone through a concealed intercom before the front door opened. Agent Rebecca Torres of the FBI greeted them at the door. She was a woman in her early 40s, with an efficient manner and kind eyes that immediately put Tyler at ease when she knelt down to introduce herself. "You must be Tyler," Agent Torres said with a warm smile. "I heard you have a very special dog who's been taking good care of you." Tyler nodded solemnly. "Bear saved us from the bad people. He's the best dog in the whole world." "I bet he is. Would you like to see the backyard? It's fenced in, so Bear can run around safely while the adults talk." Emma was grateful for Agent Torres's thoughtfulness in making sure Tyler felt welcome. The little boy had been through more trauma in the past day than most children experienced in their entire lives, but he was handling it with the resilience that never ceased to amaze her. While Tyler and Bear explored the secure backyard under the watchful eye of another agent, Detective Chen briefed Agent Torres on everything they had discovered. Emma watched the FBI agent's expression grow increasingly serious as she examined David's letter and learned about the evidence on the external hard drives. "Mrs. Walsh," Agent Torres said after reviewing the documents, "your son has provided us with what appears to be documentation of a major criminal enterprise, money laundering, tax fraud, and corruption involving multiple businesses and potentially several government officials." Emma still felt overwhelmed by the scope of what David had uncovered. "I just don't understand how my son, working as an accountant for a small firm, could have stumbled onto something this big. Criminal organizations need legitimate businesses to launder their money, Agent Torres explained. Accounting firms are perfect for this because they handle large cash transactions routinely. Your son was probably hired specifically because he was honest and competent. They needed someone who could keep accurate books while not asking too many questions about unusual transactions. But David did ask questions, Emma said. Exactly. And that's when he became a threat instead of an asset. Agent Torres connected one of David's external drives to a secure laptop computer. As she scrolled through the files, her expression became increasingly grim. Mrs. Walsh, your son documented transactions totaling over $50 million over the past 18 months. Shell companies, offshore accounts, payments to individuals who appear to be government employees. This is extensive enough to bring down an entire criminal network. Emma thought about David working late at his office, carefully documenting evidence that he knew could cost him his life. He had been so young when he died, only 32, with his whole life ahead of him. But he had chosen to do the right thing, even when it put his family in danger. Agent Torres, how long will Tyler and I need to stay in protective custody? That depends on how quickly we can identify and arrest the people involved. Based on what your son documented, we're looking at a conspiracy that includes multiple suspects. Some of them are probably already aware that we have this evidence. Detective Chen, who had been quiet while Agent Torres examined the files, suddenly spoke up. Agent Torres, I think we have a leak in local law enforcement. Agent Torres looked up from the laptop. What makes you say that? The people following Mrs. Walsh knew exactly where we were going today. They found us at the old house where we retrieved the evidence, and they followed us when we left. The only people who knew our movements were law enforcement personnel. Emma felt a chill of fear. If there were corrupt officers involved in the conspiracy, then no one could be completely trusted. Even the safe house might not be truly safe if the wrong people knew they were there. Agent Torres seemed to read Emma's thoughts. Mrs. Walsh, I want you to know that this location is known only to federal agents. Detective Chen is the only local officer who has this address, and I trust her completely. How can you be sure? Emma asked. Because Detective Chen is the officer your son specifically mentioned in his letter as the only one he trusted. David had good instincts about people. Emma felt slightly reassured, but she was beginning to understand that David's evidence was so damaging to powerful people that they would stop at nothing to silence anyone who knew about it. Through the kitchen window, Emma could see Tyler throwing a tennis ball for Bear in the fenced backyard. The dog seemed to understand that this was a safe space where he could relax slightly while still remaining protective of Tyler. The sight of her grandson playing normally, even in such abnormal circumstances, gave Emma hope that they might somehow get through this nightmare. Agent Torres continued analyzing David's files, occasionally making notes or copying specific documents to a separate folder. After an hour of intensive work, she looked up with an expression that combined satisfaction and concern. Mrs. Walsh, your son has given us enough evidence to prosecute at least 12 individuals for federal crimes. The documentation is meticulous: bank records, communication logs, even audio recordings of conversations where suspects discuss their illegal activities. Emma felt proud of David's thoroughness, even as she grieved for what his courage had cost him. Will it be enough to convict them? Absolutely, but here's our challenge. Several of the people implicated in these files are in positions where they could interfere with our investigation if they know we're coming. Detective Chen frowned. What kind of positions? Agent Torres turned the laptop screen so they could see a list of names David had compiled. Emma gasped when she recognized several of them. That's the mayor, Emma said, pointing to one name. And that's Judge Morrison. He's handled some of Tyler's custody paperwork. Your son documented payments to both of them, Agent Torres confirmed. Mrs. Walsh, this conspiracy reaches into the highest levels of local government. These people have the power to influence police investigations, court proceedings, even federal inquiries if they know what we're planning. Emma realized why David had been so careful about who he trusted. The criminals he was exposing weren't just ordinary lawbreakers. They were the very people citizens relied on to enforce laws and ensure justice. Agent Torres, what happens next? We're going to coordinate simultaneous arrests of all the suspects your son identified. It has to happen quickly and quietly before they realize how much evidence we have. Agent Torres's phone rang, and she stepped away to take the call privately. Emma could hear her speaking in urgent, clipped sentences. though she couldn't make out the specific words. When Agent Torres returned, her expression was troubled. "Mrs. Walsh, we have a complication. Marcus Webb, the private investigator who was conducting surveillance on your family, left behind files in his office. We just discovered that he was working directly for Judge Morrison." Emma's stomach dropped. Judge Morrison had seemed like such a kind man when he handled Tyler's guardianship proceedings. She had trusted him with her family's future, never imagining that he might be connected to the people who murdered David and Rachel. A federal judge was hiring someone to spy on us? Not a federal judge. Judge Morrison handles local cases. But yes, he was paying Marcus Webb to monitor your activities and report back on anything you might know about your son's work. Detective Chen stood up abruptly. "Agent Torres, if Judge Morrison knew about our investigation, he could have warned the other suspects." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of. We may have to accelerate our timeline for arrests." Emma felt as though the walls were closing in around them. The people David had been trying to expose had infiltrated every level of the justice system that was supposed to protect innocent families like hers. Agent Torres made several more phone calls, speaking to what sounded like FBI agents in different locations. Emma gathered that a major operation was being organized, with arrests planned in multiple cities simultaneously. Tyler came running in from the backyard, his cheeks flushed from playing in the cold air. Bear followed close behind, alert but calmer than he had been all day. "Grandma, Bear caught the tennis ball in the air 6 times, Tyler announced proudly. Emma hugged him close, trying to maintain a normal tone despite the gravity of their situation. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Bear is very athletic." Agent Torres knelt down to Tyler's level. "Tyler, you and your grandma are going to stay here with us for a few more days while we finish some important work. Is that okay with you?" Tyler nodded seriously. "Are you going to catch the bad people who hurt Mommy and Daddy?" Agent Torres' expression softened. "We're going to try very hard to do exactly that." Emma was amazed by Tyler's understanding of their situation. At 5 years old, he couldn't grasp the full complexity of the conspiracy that had destroyed his family. But he understood that his parents had been hurt by bad people, and that the good people were trying to make it right. Bear positioned himself next to Tyler's chair as they sat down for lunch, maintaining his protective stance even in the secure environment. Emma realized that the dog's behavior had probably saved their lives multiple times over the past 36 hours, and she felt a surge of gratitude for Officer Crawford's decision to let Bear live with their family. Agent Torres received another phone call during lunch, and when she finished, she looked directly at Emma with news that would change everything. "Mrs. Walsh, we just arrested Judge Morrison at his home. During the search, we found a file with detailed plans to eliminate you and Tyler permanently. They weren't planning to stop with the bomb attack." Emma felt sick. "What kind of plans?" "The details aren't important, but Mrs. Walsh, your son's evidence has stopped these people from hurting anyone else. The arrests are happening right now. All 12 suspects are being taken into custody simultaneously." Emma looked at Tyler, who was feeding Bear small pieces of his sandwich under the table. This little boy would never have to fear the people who killed his parents. David's sacrifice had finally brought justice. But even as relief washed over her, Emma wondered if there were others involved who hadn't been caught, others who might still pose a threat to her family.
As if reading her thoughts, Agent Torres spoke quietly. "Mrs. Walsh, it's over. Your family is safe now."
But Emma couldn't help wondering, was it really over, or were there still secrets waiting to be discovered? If you think there's more to this story that hasn't been revealed yet, let us know in the comments below. And if this incredible true story of courage and justice moved you, please like, share, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from around the world.